think it's really important to even have your children help pay for some of their college if that's what they want to do, go to school in some form. It doesn't have to be all of it, but something where it makes them feel like they're invested in their future and their education as well. I think that can also be important, as then they go off to being a full-blown adult after that. So yeah, just finding more and more ways to instill the value of a dollar in youth, I think, is a great way to start. And I was very lucky to have that myself.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I'm your host, as always, Yona Weiss. Very excited and grateful to be here today with Leanna Haakons, all the way from New York City. What's going on, Leanna? How are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a long time that we've been wanting to do this, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm grateful for you taking the time. I know you do a lot of these. You are a very sought after speaker on, Leanna, if you guys don't know who she is the founder of Black Hawk Financial. She's been featured on pretty much every network that you can imagine and has been the host of many media groups and podcasts and things like that. Also the author of a great book called Young, Fun, and Financially Free. So I'm excited to kind of dig in where you got the premise for such an amazing title for a book. I don't know if you came up with that or if the editors, came up with that title, but it's amazing. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into that, and where the impetus for such an amazing book like that came from.
Well, admittedly, the title was not my idea. That was the publisher. But I said, that alliteration sounds good to me. They love alliteration. So That's what they were looking for. And they were the ones that came up with it, not me. I wouldn't say I'm a natural writer. I'm definitely a natural talker and interviewer and interviewee, but I'm not a natural writer. But I think the passion behind why I wanted to write a book is what made it come together so quickly. And the idea of a book actually came from a client that I had. Maybe the book came out around 5 years ago now. So this is maybe 6 years ago. I had a client who had a new college daughter and was spending a lot of money on the credit card he had given her for school expenses and whatnot while she was away at school, and just asked me, hey, you're so conversational about money and approachable as a person. Would you be able to talk to her and kind of explain the basics of money, and that credit card doesn't mean the things are free. Right. Someone has to pay for it. And so first and foremost, I said, well, this is your fault because you gave her a credit card before her telling her anything about it. But yes, I would gladly do that. So I get along with her very well. And yeah, it was then his suggestion, like, you should write a book. There needs to be more books that are very approachable for anyone to get the kind of money 101s and investing, finance, adulting 101s, because there's lots of stories about insurance and things like that in there as well. And people's turnaround stories, like, things like Steve Harvey is someone I've met through the finance world. He was homeless till he was almost 40. Wow. So his story is in the book because, not everybody learns these things in your teens or your college years or early 20s. Sometimes it takes people a little bit longer to get the 101s and really get ahead in life in your financial world. And so I like to include a lot of those stories as well, because It doesn't really matter where you are. If you have opportunity and access like we do in Europe or in North America, the Western world, you have all the opportunities to change your financial situation.
For sure. Were these ideas things that you were given, kind of brought up and taught at a young age, or did you come upon these on your own as you kind of grew into a young adult?
So I always say I was very blessed to have parents that taught me the value of a dollar. Investing was not a part of the conversation, but, selling, my brother and sister, and I was the middle one, we would be selling cans of soda and cookies at the golf course. And our mom would drive us there, drive us down to not just any corner. Like, we wanted to hit the private golf club. So, stuff like that. And then we would have to pay her for supplies and gas and use of the car and the cooler. So just basics like that of the value of a dollar for
Right.
children all the way up through their college years. And I think it's really important to even have your children help pay for some of their college if that's what they want to do, go to school in some form. It doesn't have to be all of it, but something where it makes them feel like they're invested in their future and their education as well. I think that can also be important, as then they go off to being a full-blown adult after that. So yeah, just finding more and more ways to instill the value of a dollar in youth, I think is a great way to start. And I was very lucky to have that myself.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about financial independence, but I mean, it's financially free, financial independence. I mean, there's a lot of kind of correlations there, but as a young person who's just kind of given everything on a silver platter, I think people like that end up making bigger financial mistakes than being taught the value of money at a young age. And I'm kind of selfishly learning a lot about this from people like yourself, because I have kids, I have teenagers, and I want to make sure that I'm giving them the right guidance that they can then make the right financial decisions for themselves and make sure that they're valuing money and not just spending my money, right? And earning on their own.
More than just the financial mistakes and decisions, right? Like there's so many social and cultural things that go along with knowing the value of a dollar, being grateful and having gratitude for the opportunities that you have growing up in a Western world. And that's also all the proceeds of the book go to a charity that provides income opportunity and economic sustainability for people in third world countries. And so again, the reason for that is to give sort of a subtle reminder to people that, yeah, you have free internet, you have free education all over social media from great people if you can find a good source, and so many opportunities to get jobs and educate yourself and change your life that billions of people around the world do not have, just by way of where they were born, nothing that they chose in their life. So yeah, I think it's just a good reminder. It starts with the value of a dollar at the end of the day. So all good lessons.
Yeah. And you get into investing in the book, right, as well, in terms of not just learning the value of a dollar, learning about credit. You mentioned insurance and stories of just how to become more financially independent, but also how to use that money and have it work for you. I mean, is that something that, like you said, you didn't grow up learning about investing? Where did that start? Because I know that's a big part of who you are, what you do, what you help people with at this time. How did that come about?
And I mean, I love real estate. I can talk about real estate all day. I can talk about lots of different money subjects all day, but most people always come back to me with the investing part, because my business, Blackhawk Financial, we do marketing, business development, investor relations for financial firms, whether it's a fund or a RIA or some type of financial services product. We've actually done marketing projects and stuff for real estate developers as well, too. So I've always had an interest in real estate. But it's really, people think about me for the investing side. There's also all the, CNBC and Bloomberg and all that kind of stuff. I used to host a show on Yahoo Finance. So a lot of people want to come back to me with investing. And, I didn't make the entire book about that, because you really have to go through so many steps of education and of getting the other basics like budgeting and what is a credit score? How do you increase your credit score? I've learned that now more than ever, being an immigrant that's moved to the US, starting with a credit score of 0 4 years ago. But yeah, there's a lot of the basics that you have to kind of wrap your head around first. Not complicated stuff. I don't want to scare anyone, but just some basics that you have to do before you start investing. And then there's some really, really easy ways to start investing. And that's what I try to make so approachable, not only in the book, but my Instagram is pretty much where I go to for most of my online education and stuff as well. And I don't formally sell anything to anyone. I don't sell courses or anything like that or coaching, but I'm always happy to help people in the DMs if they have questions about getting started investing. And yeah, that's definitely, I think, where people find me most is on the investing side.
Sure. But what, if you had to choose one thing that you want to talk about or you're passionate about most, that's like really driving it, like what would that one thing be?
I mean, it would be investing in all ways. So not investing necessarily like we're kind of probably thinking of in our heads, stocks and the stock market and the New York Stock Exchange. And I get to have lots of fun days and times down there too. But real estate investing, there's also, bonds, which I think not a lot of people think of. I think most people, our age and younger definitely don't even really need to look at bonds, because you can probably take on some more risk at a younger age. So you have a lot longer time to recover if that risk doesn't pay off for you. And, there is sort of that long saying that I think is absolutely true that, risk equals rewards. The more you're willing to risk with your money and you're investing, quite often, the more you will be rewarded. I can't say that's the same thing with things that I don't even consider investing, because right now, an example of that would be like crypto. Crypto, you can say you invest in crypto, but I still consider crypto and a lot of digital asset companies, even very, very early stage startup investing is often speculation because they haven't necessarily proven their store of value or their use of transaction and use in a regular day-to-day market, which is sort of the case with coins and Bitcoin and Ethereum and stuff like that. People are starting to use them more in transactions, but they haven't really proven their value and their worth yet, either again as a store of value or as a way to transact in a modern world. So anything that I don't think doesn't answer one of those two things is a speculation to me. You're speculating with your money. You're not necessarily investing your money. I could probably get a lot of backlash about that, but that's sort of and I do things in crypto. I go to crypto events. I've had crypto clients. So not bashing the space at all, but that's just how I differentiate between something that I'm investing in, like real estate or, bigger stocks and stuff like that, public companies, and what speculation is. And then I try to keep for myself personally, and I would recommend to most people, that speculative money is that part of your portfolio of your investments or things you're putting money into that you hope to grow to be at least like less than 5%, maybe like 10% if you're working directly in that industry and you have a very high level of knowledge. But yeah, you can't be putting too much money into the speculative stuff. You definitely want to go for long-term investing that has been shown to work for hundreds of years.
Absolutely. And I've seen you talk and be on some of these conferences and some of the, the crypto and the blockchain and all these different industries, which, like you said, they haven't yet proven themselves entirely. They're still relatively new. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's only maybe, 5, 10, 15 years max for a lot of these products or these startup investments or speculations, if you will.
Yeah.
But people get driven by them and so much noise is created around it that there's so much hype. And especially, in the recent debacles of what happened with FTX and, so many celebrities backing that and getting behind it when it was really just a lot of speculation and there wasn't a lot of foundation behind that. It's really hard to tell.
It's something that, and I talk about this in my book a little bit as well. The reason why all these things still end up blowing up like this, even, some startups, and, we've seen a lot of like the millennial fraud startup stuff lately, like, well, this was not even a startup that regular people were investing in, but the Fire Festival with Billy McFarland, Anna Delvey in New York, she was scamming like Fortress Investments, like one of the biggest investment banking groups in New York, or Frank, the millennial girl who recently, I forget her name, inflated her customer numbers to JP Morgan and caused a huge fraud, got $175 million. A lot of people, whether you're a big time banker and you've had experience for decades, or you're a new investor wanting to invest in ICOs and new crypto coins, the draw of get rich quick and the draw of something that will make you a lot of money and give you a good name for being smarter than the rest of them, that you got in at the ground floor, that has always been around. That's like the get rich quick mindset is a part of history and it's a part of psychology. Like it's embedded in us biologically. And so we do often, even I sometimes, when I was really working more heavily in the crypto space last year, would be like, wow, this sounds like, stars and dreams and money and excitement and ooh, like I should be a part of this. And it's really, really hard sometimes when you're so excited and all the people around you have the group think, everyone, like all the celebrities that were involved with FTX. I knew Sam. Like there was so many people in that circle that were highly intelligent that you would never guess otherwise. You think, in that situation and lots of situations, the reason why other people ended up going in and investing is because, JP Morgan put the stamp on it. One of the other big VCs put a stamp on it. And so you kind of think, especially as like an at-home investor, well, if those firms have done their due diligence and they've put their stamp of approval on it, I mean, it must be fine for me to invest in. And then unfortunately, that's where, if things unravel and it doesn't work out, when at-home investors and retail investors and clients get hurt, that's, where it's a real shame. But it's embedded in our biology to look for get rich quick. And, you can have a little bit of that with speculative things, but I think driving home the point of long-term returns, long-term money, saving for retirement, through stocks, well-established companies that you believe in their future, and, well-established investing in real estate, which we know has also worked for many, many people for hundreds of years. That's where the majority of your portfolio should be, that 90%.
Sure. And like you said, it's tried the test of time. You want to go with things that are much more secured, even though it's hard to tell. I mean, how do you do due diligence on something that others have, or like you said, others have already seemingly done due diligence on and have come out clean and have come out like it's a good investment? I mean, even where I'm investing in limited partner syndications, where I'm putting money with a trusted sponsor who is buying commercial property or multifamily or mobile home park. I've done a lot of those. I can just totally rely on the sponsor who has a great track record and is much more financially literate than I am in terms of learning how to build and run the Excels. I'm not so good at that. I do know basics and I know enough to figure it out on my own, but I have to do that. I have to make sure that I'm looking at the numbers myself and at least consulting with someone outside, a third party who can give a little more objectivity. I think everyone needs that sort of, a friend or an advisor or, someone. You can't just trust what you see on the internet. You can't just trust what you see on or hear on a podcast, even like this one, right? You want to make sure that you are checking before putting any size money. I've made that mistake. I don't want to talk about it too much right now because it hasn't finally brewed down, but I put, a little bit of money with a startup that was, to me, it was just like a speculation. And I thought, okay, they could do great, but I didn't really run the numbers and I didn't really know much about it. And right now it seems like I've totally lost that investment. It's not a huge amount, but again, I was ready to lose that. And because it was speculation, it wasn't a sound investment. I didn't have the ability or capability to do due diligence. I asked a few other people that I knew and trusted that had also invested in this. And to me, that was enough. But you live and you learn. And I think I learned my lesson there.
And a lot of times too, with things that end up seeming too good to be true, there's a lot of pressure around the timeline of making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's someone that's like legitimately trying to scam people, or it just ends up the project just didn't work out, or the sourcing, fell through, or whatever it might be. Sometimes the pressure on the timeline to make a decision, an investor, you're going to lose this get rich quick, even though we don't call it that. It's just in your head. You think
it's an opportunity. Yeah. And you can't miss out, right?
Yeah. Opportunity. Oh, I might not get this opportunity again.
We were already 90% filled with investors.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the timeline pressure that makes people make quick decisions without thoroughly doing their own due diligence or thinking it through. And in a lot of these situations, there's just not, the due diligence is just not available. You're doing a private investment or something like yours, where you just really can't do as much as you would if it was a public stock you were investing in, or you're buying shares of Simon Property Group or whatever. So yeah, you just can't necessarily do all the due diligence that you want to do. But that's why you have to reserve a really small amount of your portfolio to invest in opportunities like that, or speculate on opportunities like that.
For sure. Now, you mentioned briefly that, you're an immigrant to the US. You spent time, obviously you grew up in Canada, spent time in Europe, and are now living in the US full time and looking to, get more into the real estate world in the US, which is obviously a great market to be in. That's the only place I invest in real estate is in the US. And I think there are opportunities in the US, especially with regard to financing. Obviously, it has a lot to do with the markets, but there are opportunities and tax benefits that come along with it as well that a lot of other countries just don't have. I'm curious to hear where you go about learning about different investments or finding them, or what types of, properties or real estate are you interested in?
So yeah, I grew up in Canada and I've lived in France, England, and the US. And I would say for a lot of people, whether you've gone through a bankruptcy or you're new to a country, particularly talking about the US, a lot of people would be shocked at how difficult it can be. But I would also like to say that it's also not necessarily that difficult if you're following the basic guidelines of building credit, saving for a down payment, and having sort of your right ducks in a row to make it happen. I mean, it can be difficult because yes, just, building your credit in a new country can be hard. My path toward that, to going from Canada to the US, which people often think is like really easy and you can just walk over the border and then you can live in the US, but I may as well have been from Afghanistan. It makes no difference. There's a certain amount of visas for a certain type of visa. and everybody gets thrown into a pool, and then they go through applications, and some people get approved and some people get denied. There's no special pathway for Canadians, unfortunately. And I paid just as much in legal fees for my immigration lawyers as probably a lot of other people do. But yeah, that being said, when you move to a new country like the US, I had zero credit score. I hadn't had a social security number before. I had always been sort of a temporary person in the country. And so I started from zero, and it took, the best place for everyone to start. And I go over this in the book, but there's a lot of basic education out there that'll tell you this stuff. Start with a secured credit card. So I walked into a Bank of America. I showed them that I now had a stub, like a pay stub from my internet bill or whatever, that I have an address in the state, opened up a bank account, asked them for a credit card. Obviously, your credit score is zero. You just got your social security number last week downtown. So, and this is the same thing for people that have gone through bankruptcy, because they essentially go back to zero as well. Start with a secured credit card, which is essentially like a debit card. You're funding the bank $1,000 or $1,500 or $500 first into your bank account. And then they give you a card that's looks like a debit card or credit card. And you use that, and you're basically just spending the money you already put into the bank because they know that you're no risk. So I did that for 6 months, only 6 months. And I went from a zero credit score to a 700. And that was through always paying any bills on time, like setting up automatic payments for my cell phone, my internet at home, anything else like that. And I think I only had 2 or 3 reoccurring payments every month, 6 months of doing that on time, every time, full balance is paid. And then I had already gotten a 700 credit score. It might've been 690.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I think about it. But regardless, a fairly decent credit score. Yeah. And at that point, 6 months in, I had a W-2. I would say this is the most important thing, especially if you're self-employed, like I've been for almost 10 years. I'm in this country based on the fact that I'm an expert in financial strategy. That's what my visa is for. And so I'm going to the mortgage broker and to the bank trying to get, okay, well, I've been on the secured credit card $1,000 at a time. Can I get a real credit card now? Clearly, look, I have a credit score. You can Google me. I'm kind of known for this stuff. And the banks also don't care. But I would say, literally, you can Google me. I'm kind of known for this stuff. You can give me a real credit card now. They would not give me a real credit card. But because I had one client that had signed me up as a W-2, so as a full-time role, I was able to get approved for a mortgage of $1 million. Would you believe it? Crazy. We can talk about it. It's not that big of a deal, I don't think. But Bank of America wouldn't even give me a real credit card. I was still on a $500 secured credit card, and I got $1 million through my mortgage broker. So that just goes to show the power of having a W-2 if you're going to get a job in your new country in the US. A W-2 is very powerful. I would say it's very difficult to do it self-employed. So when I didn't have that W-2 client anymore, it's a lot harder to get approved for a mortgage, and the down payment's going to be 50% versus 3.5% if you want to do an FHA, or 5% or whatever. The other interesting thing I've learned for immigrants, people that are on a visa or people that are new to the country, so you're a legal immigrant in the US, you also have access to the first-time buyer programs like FHA loans, 3.5% down, up to $1 million in residential property. So really great. I haven't done this yet, but this will be my first multifamily in the US. And this is what I'm going to do is because I have found out now, everyone, if you're legally in the US, you have access to the FHA loan, and you can only do it one time, and you can do it up to $1 million. And most of the people probably listening to your podcast know that a residential property is up to a fourplex. So you can go out and buy a fourplex, house hack it, put 3.5% down, max out that FHA loan amount, which is $1 million. And there you've got your first house hack and a fourplex going. That is probably for someone that's still not even a green card yet in the country. And I hope to be this year. But that is the best way to get yourself started on a really great stream of cash flowing real estate investment as a new person in the United States, or someone that went through a bankruptcy or went through a really bad time with their credit. That's a 6 month to a year program.
Amazing.
You can really, and all it is really the biggest points of looking at what is involved in raising your credit score, and then having a W-2. I would say those are the two big things about getting approved. And then, a lot of people, I didn't even know. I was like, I can get an FHA for $1 million bucks. Cool. I'm not even a citizen. It was. So anyway, and I think that immigrants coming to America, they deserve a lot of credit. It is a very hard country to get into immigration wise. Most of us are very hard workers. I follow a lot of like immigration pages and stuff on Instagram, but it's like there's all these memes of like, if you want to get something done, hire an immigrant, because we know that we're lucky to be here and we work really hard, a lot of us. So that's just sort of a little tip of advice for people that are either rebuilding their credit after bankruptcy or after just destroying their credit for one reason or another. And immigrants that are new to the country is that the FHA $1 million up to a fourplex, which I think is just
it's huge.
Game changer.
It's huge. I mean, the challenge is always finding the property. I mean, you're finding a fourplex in Manhattan where you live. for
I'm in Texas. I think I'm a Texas investor, Texas and Colorado.
Okay.
So,
there you go. You'll find something there. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You got to pick your spots, right? But also, if you have goals of financial independence and goals of, a long-term future of investing, I think it's worth the sacrifice of maybe not living or house hacking in the exact A-, B+ neighborhood that you want to buy in, but buy in a C+ neighborhood and, live in it for a year or do what you have to do and give that short-term, I don't even want to say pain because it's not pain. It's a short-term change of your lifestyle for a long-term gain.
Right. I think it really comes back to what you said earlier about the risk and the reward. I mean, that is a little bit of a risk that you're taking to kind of move yourself out of a comfortable situation that you would prefer to be in, or a lifestyle that maybe, your A+ lifestyle, and taking a risk or just taking it a notch down for that long-term gain. And I think a lot of people who want to build financial independence need to have that foundation of just thinking long-term and not thinking short-term and then get rich quick, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah. And that's like the value of a dollar, like buying stuff on sale, you don't have to buy all of your groceries from Whole Foods. If you really like the produce at Whole Foods, and sometimes they have good sales on produce, why don't you do that at Whole Foods and get your more expensive things like proteins and stuff elsewhere? Like there's little things you have to do over years that ends up making, $100 a month difference. That's $1,200 at the end of the year from one tiny change. Like there really is so many ways to strategize your life. I mean, I'm the queen of that. That's literally why I wrote a book, because people see me by myself in Aspen or in Saint-Tropez or whatever, driving whatever cars that I've had. And everyone asked me, how do you live this life? Like, how do you afford this lifestyle? I said, because I can order 60% of the things I need for my house online at Walmart. And they're like, what? You shop at Walmart? You only shop at Louis Vuitton. I'm like, I don't need toilet paper from Louis Vuitton. I can get that the cheapest at Walmart. I don't have to buy toilet paper from Whole Foods. It's, it's just stuff like that. And I think perception is like sometimes so deceiving. And that's why I think all of us should really be careful about the information and the people that we watch and absorb.
Yeah, it's important.
Through social media, because it's not real. Like it's everybody's best foot forward. A lot of it is not even real. A lot of it's sponsored, not paid for. There's the extremely ridiculous joke. I think it's a joke, but how people like pay $300 to go take photos on the steps, like as if they're walking into a private jet. All that kind of BS. Like it's just the comparison is the thief of joy. Financial envy is the same thing. Thief of joy in your own life. And none of us should be aspiring to be anyone other than our absolute best and true selves. And there are so many ways, like I have found those examples, like to enjoy the things that you enjoy in life. Like I really like nice cars. But now that I live in New York, I take the subway and I don't even take Uber because I'm like, why? I don't even need to take some like crappy Uber and get stuck in traffic. All my friends take Ubers everywhere and they're probably spending $400 a week on an Uber. But I'm like, the subway is $275 and it's probably less traffic. It's kind of like a little gross. Sometimes you might run into someone that's a little creepy, but it's fast and it's efficient. And I just don't care. Like it's stuff like that doesn't bother me. I'm like, when I move back out into the suburbs somewhere, I'll get a nice car again. But for now, Uber just doesn't do it for me. If it's a $40 Uber or $275 on the subway, even if it's a Saturday night, you better believe I'll take a subway to dinner. I don't care.
That's awesome.
But I can tell you, there's not a lot of people in New York that necessarily do that. So
it's true. It's really about the change in lifestyle and really the mindset, really, like you said, knowing that you can save so much money. And what are you doing with those savings? I mean, reinvesting that and using that money to do things with. It's just, to me, it's silly But at the same time, you see so many people doing that. And I think you've given so much incredible, I'd like to say wise advice on this podcast, very wise beyond your years, Leanna. So I appreciate that. I want to transition now to what we call the final four. These are four questions I ask all my guests. And the first question for you, what's the worst job you ever had?
I would say my first job out of college was probably the worst I ever had. The market had tanked. I'd been looking for a job for a long time. This was in 2009. So the market was absolutely in the hole in that summer. And right after the financial crisis, and ended up getting a job as a junior financial advisor. And I learned a lot about life insurance, but I was so young that I didn't think to ask or realize that not even all advisors do securities, so work with stocks. So I basically just ended up paper pushing life insurance plans. I learned a lot about life insurance, but I was constantly answering the phone to people that were wanting to file their life insurance claim because their spouse had passed away, like every day, just picking up the phone with someone's spouse had passed away, and they were telling me about it, and I had to deal with it. And it was just a really sad job, and I didn't enjoy the working environment. But I mean, it was a step forward. I was still working in finance. I still learned things. I learned a lot about life insurance, so always valuable.
Wow. Yeah, that's for sure. Probably learned a lot about, psychology and empathy at that point. Second question, what's a book you read that's given you a paradigm shift?
I read a book. Well, actually, I didn't read it. It was on Audible, and I listened to it.
That counts.
And just in this past month, and it's written by, I can't remember the woman's name, but she's the founder of a social media and podcast and everything called Career Contessa. And her book is called Power Moves. And it was sort of like a book written for women, but, men could listen to it as well. And it's talking about making power moves in your career and what's considered a power move, like a big shift. And even in my own life right now, I feel like I'm going through maybe like a power move shift in what I want to do going forward. And I spent my year last year on planes all over the world hosting financial conferences like Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Africa and Europe and all over the US with family offices, sovereign wealth funds, like just princes, royalty, interviewing a queen. Like,
that sounds like fun.
It was. However, I think the power move that I'm making in my life this year, in my mid-30s now, is prioritizing some more of my personal aspirations and my personal life goals, and not living on a plane anymore, spending more time at home in New York next to Central Park with my dog, and developing some more personal things. Because power moves in your life, whether it's your career and your personal life, we're always having to shift things, as we age and as our life changes to make our life what we want. And I just realized that maybe I'm not getting some of the things that I want in my personal life because I'm subconsciously spending time on planes all over the world doing things that at my heart of hearts is not what's most important to me.
Yeah,
so anyway, it's called Power Moves, Career Contessa. And I just listened to that a couple weeks ago that opened my eyes to a couple things.
That's really powerful. I think knowing how to make those moves and just having that kind of introspection and realization, especially like you said, figuring out at that time in your life, we're like, okay, I need to focus on things that are really important to me and not necessarily, what's going to drive my financial independent or financial career or career moves or whatever, but also in your personal life. Really, really important. So I'm glad you brought that up. That sounds good. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes for anyone who wants to check that out. Career Contessa Power Moves. And we'll find it and we'll figure out who the author is. And third question is going to be, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
This is so random, but I grew up in the early 2000s, like tons of one-hit wonders and like pop stars. And like, I loved all of it. Spice Girls as a little girl growing up or whatever. I just want to have a one-hit wonder. Like I want to have one song, one music video. I just think it would be so fun. That's it. I want to become a better singer for one song.
There you go. All right. That's awesome. Good for you. It's a great skill to want to have, is just
Well, I'm not artistic, or I don't really think I have a musical bone in my body, but everyone tells me, I always have said that to my parents growing up, especially my 20s and stuff being so financially related. Like, I'm so not creative. I'm not artistic. I don't have any of that. I'm just such a straight arrow type of person. And my mom would always say, but Leanna, you're so creative in business. And I'm like, well, that's true.
That's good. That's a nice spin on it.
That's it.
Nice spin. All right. We'll give you that. Okay. Fourth and final question is going to be what does success mean to you?
I think success means living your happiest life without constraints and without guidelines that have been set forth for you by people outside of yourself.
Very powerful. So deep and so powerful. I love that definition. A lot of times we're looking outside ourselves for
basically to be able to do whatever the heck you want.
There you go.
I also try to be humorous, so I didn't want to end on such a serious note, but I am being very serious. Like that's, I think that's all we ever want is just to be our happiest selves and not having to do whatever it is to be successful on anybody else's terms or creating happiness for ourselves on anybody else's terms. And I'm not quite there yet myself. I think a lot of us are working toward it still, but that's what I'm hoping for in my life, my success.
Absolutely. And you it takes a long time to define what that means first. Oftentimes
and it's evolving, right? We always, like making power moves. Our life circumstances change, our family circumstances change. And I wrote a lot about that in the book too. And that's a lot of the reasons why I wrote the book. I've been through like multiple lawsuits, sudden death of a partner. I've been through a lot of stuff that made me have to roll with the punches and make power moves in another direction. And life's always changing. So we just have to roll with it and adjust as things come forth in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. Leanna, how can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
Best place to find me is usually on my Instagram, Leanna, Leanna _Hawk, HAWK, and Black Hawk Financial is the name of my company. If anyone needing marketing, investor relations consulting. And I'm also on Twitter, not as much anymore, but Leanna Black Hawk on Twitter.
All right. Very cool. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes again for anyone to reach out to you. And it's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. Learned a lot today and excited just to be able to share this wisdom with the world.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. And to our listeners, thank you guys for listening all the way to the end. Once again, remember, the best advice comes only when you ask.
Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.